Did Jared Kushner fulfill prophecy? The complete timeline of the covenant with many. 2,500 years ago, a Hebrew prophet named Daniel received a vision. It was a vision about the end times, about a covenant that would be made. And then, in September of 2020, something extraordinary occurred. In the Rose Garden of the White House, 4 nations signed a historic peace agreement: Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, the United States. They called it the Abraham Accords. And standing behind it all, orchestrating every detail, was a man with no diplomatic experience, no political background, no military training. His name? Jared Kushner, a real estate investor, the son-in-law of Donald Trump, and possibly, just possibly, the architect of the most prophetically significant moment in modern history. Now, 5 years later, in October of 2025, that same man has returned, not to broker peace with 2 nations, but with 20. You will be shocked when you find 8 discoveries about this timeline. Discovery 1. Who is Jared Kushner? January 2017. Donald Trump is inaugurated as the 45th President of the United States. And one of his first moves? Appointing his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, as senior advisor to the president. Now, this raised eyebrows immediately. Because Kushner had 0 experience in government, 0 experience in foreign policy, 0 experience in diplomacy. His background? Real estate. Specifically, luxury real estate in Manhattan. But Trump had a vision. He said, Jared's going to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He's going to bring peace to the Middle East. And people laughed. They mocked. They said, this is impossible. Presidents have tried for decades and failed. What makes you think a real estate guy can do it? But Trump saw something in Kushner, a deal-making instinct, a willingness to think outside the box, and most importantly, access. Because while Kushner didn't have political experience, he had something more valuable in the Middle East: relationships. In May of 2017, just months after Trump took office, Kushner traveled to Saudi Arabia. He met with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS. They connected instantly. Similar ages, similar worldviews, both modernizers, both pragmatists. And MBS told Kushner something crucial. Forget about the Palestinians for now. They're not ready to deal. Focus on normalizing relations between Israel and the Arab world. That conversation changed everything, because traditionally, the approach to Middle East peace was land for peace. Israel gives up territory, Palestinians get a state, and then Arab nations normalize. But Kushner flipped it. He said, what if we normalize first? What if we get Arab states to recognize Israel, create economic ties, build trust, and then address the Palestinian issue? It was radical. It was unconventional. And it worked. In June of 2019, Kushner held a conference in Bahrain called Peace to Prosperity. He unveiled a $50 billion economic plan for the region. Jobs, infrastructure, investment. The Palestinians boycotted. They said, you're trying to buy us off. You're ignoring our political demands. But the Arab nations showed up. They listened. They engaged. And Kushner saw an opening. Then, in January of 2020, Trump released what he called the Deal of the Century. It was a 181-page plan, written largely by Kushner. It offered Israel sovereignty over parts of the West Bank. It proposed a limited Palestinian state with conditions. The Palestinians rejected it immediately, called it a betrayal, a surrender. But here's what's interesting. Several Arab nations quietly supported it. Why? Because it aligned with their interests, countering Iran, building economic ties with Israel, modernizing their own economies. And Kushner capitalized on that support. By mid-2020, he was in secret negotiations with the United Arab Emirates. What if, he proposed, UAE becomes the first Gulf state to normalize relations with Israel? Full diplomatic ties, embassies, trade, tourism. In exchange, Israel pauses annexation plans in the West Bank. And on August 13, 2020, it happened. The Israel-UAE peace agreement was announced. Suddenly, the impossible became reality. Discovery 2. The Abraham Accords. August 13, 2020. The announcement sent shockwaves through the world. Israel and the United Arab Emirates, two nations that had never officially recognized each other, were establishing full diplomatic relations. Direct flights, embassies, trade deals, security cooperation, and it happened because of Jared Kushner. But he wasn't done. Within weeks, Bahrain joined, then Sudan, then Morocco. By the end of 2020, 4 Arab nations had normalized relations with Israel, all brokered by Kushner in less than 6 months. They called it the Abraham Accords, named after Abraham, the shared patriarch of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And on September 15, 2020, the signing ceremony took place on the White House lawn. Trump stood at the podium, Netanyahu beside him, leaders from the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain in attendance. And Trump declared, "This is the dawn of a new Middle East." A new Middle East. Hold that phrase, because it's prophetically loaded. Now, let's talk about what the Abraham Accords actually accomplished. First, diplomatic recognition. For the first time since Jordan in 1994, Arab nations were opening embassies in Israel. Second, economic integration. Trade between Israel and the UAE alone jumped to over $10 billion within 2 years. Third, security cooperation. These nations began sharing intelligence, conducting joint military exercises, coordinating against Iran. Fourth, cultural exchange, flights, tourism, academic partnerships, people-to-people connections. On paper, it looked like genuine peace. But here's the problem. The Palestinians were completely left out. They called the Accords a stab in the back, a betrayal by fellow Arab nations. And critics warned, you can't have lasting peace in the Middle East without addressing the Palestinian issue. But Kushner and Trump disagreed. They said, economic prosperity and regional normalization will create conditions for a Palestinian deal later. And for a while, it seemed like they might be right. But then something happened that changed everything. Discovery 3, the fall and the war. January 20th, 2021. Donald Trump leaves office. Joe Biden is inaugurated. And suddenly, the momentum behind the Abraham Accords stalls. Biden's team keeps the agreements in place. They don't cancel them, but they don't expand them either. They stop using the term Abraham Accords. They shift focus back to the Palestinians. They try to revive the two-state solution. And Kushner? He's out. No longer in government, no longer at the table. He starts a private investment firm called Affinity Partners, and in 2022, he secures $2 billion from Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund. Critics immediately cry foul. Kushner brokered deals that benefited Saudi Arabia, and now they're paying him back. Kushner insists it's legitimate business, but the optics are bad. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, tensions are building. Hamas, the militant group that controls Gaza, sees the Abraham Accords as a threat. They're being isolated. Arab nations are aligning with Israel. No one's focusing on Palestinian statehood. And in their view, violence is the only way to force the world to pay attention. So they plan, they prepare, they wait for the right moment. And on October 7th, 2023, they strike. At dawn, Hamas launches a coordinated attack on southern Israel. Thousands of rockets, ground infiltration, mass casualties. 1,200 Israelis are killed. 250 are taken hostage. It's the deadliest day for Israel since the Yom Kippur War of 1973. And the world is shocked. How did this happen? How did Israel, with one of the most sophisticated intelligence agencies in the world, not see this coming? Some blame complacency. Some blame political dysfunction. Some blame the Abraham Accords themselves for creating a false sense of security. But regardless of the cause, the result is clear. The Middle East is plunged back into war. Israel launches a massive military campaign in Gaza. Thousands of Palestinians are killed. Infrastructure is destroyed. Humanitarian crisis escalates. And for 2 years, the war grinds on. The Abraham Accords don't collapse, but they're tested. Arab nations condemn the violence, but maintain ties with Israel. And everyone is asking, can there ever be real peace? And that's when Jared Kushner returns. Discovery 4. The Return of Kushner, 2025. November 2024. Donald Trump wins the presidency again, returns to the White House for a second term. And immediately, there's speculation. Will Kushner come back too? Officially, he stays in the private sector, maintains his investment firm, but unofficially, he's back in the game. Because Trump tasks him with something even bigger than the Abraham Accords. End the Gaza war. Bring home the hostages. Broker a comprehensive peace plan. And Kushner goes to work. He's in constant contact with Trump's official Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff. He's in Egypt, coordinating with President el-Sisi. And slowly, piece by piece, a deal starts to come together. October 8th through 13th, 2025. These 6 days become the most intense diplomatic push in modern Middle East history. Here's what happens. October 8th. After months of negotiations, Hamas signals they're willing to agree to a phased ceasefire. First phase, release 20 living hostages in exchange for Israeli withdrawal from certain areas and the release of Palestinian prisoners. October 13th, the big day. A summit in Sharm el-Sheikh. Trump attends. Egyptian President el-Sisi co-hosts. Turkish President Erdogan is there. Qatar's emir. Leaders from over 20 nations. And they sign something called the Trump Declaration for Enduring Peace and Prosperity. It's not just Israel and Hamas. It's a regional agreement. Economic zones. International oversight. Reconstruction funding from Arab nations. And when the ceremony ends, Trump steps to the microphone and says, "This is a historic dawn of a new Middle East. Permanent ceasefire. Hostages coming home. Prosperity on the horizon. A new Middle East." There's that phrase again. And standing in the background, barely visible in the photos, is Jared Kushner. No title, no official role. And that's when Bible prophecy students start paying attention, because the phrase they're seeing online, in the comment sections, in the prophecy forums, is this: He confirmed a covenant with many. Discovery 5. Prophetic Claims and Interpretations. So, what are prophecy scholars saying about all this? Let's start with the mainstream evangelical interpretation, because this isn't fringe stuff. We're talking about respected pastors, theologians, and Bible teachers who have been studying end times prophecy for decades. And when the Abraham Accords were signed in 2020, they took notice. When Kushner returned in 2025 with an even bigger deal, the conversation exploded. So, let me walk you through what's being said, what's being debated, what's being whispered in prophecy circles right now. The mainstream evangelical view. Pastors like John Hagee, Jack Hibbs, Amir Tsarfati, and John Markell have been teaching about Daniel 9:27 for decades. These aren't sensationalists. These are serious Bible students with massive followings. Millions of people listen to their teachings. And their interpretation of Daniel's prophecy goes like this. At some point in the future, possibly soon, a charismatic world leader will rise to prominence. He'll be intelligent, persuasive, solution-oriented, and he'll do something that's eluded every diplomat, every president, every world organization. He'll broker a comprehensive peace deal in the Middle East. Not just between two parties, but involving Israel and multiple nations. The Bible calls it a covenant with many. And when that deal is signed, it will trigger something. A prophetic countdown. 7 years. The final week of Daniel's 70 weeks. For the first 3.5 years, there will be peace. Or at least the appearance of peace. The world will celebrate this leader. But halfway through, at the 3.5-year mark, everything changes. He betrays Israel. He stops temple worship. He sets up what the Bible calls the abomination of desolation. And the Great Tribulation begins. Now, most of these teachers are very careful. They don't name names. They don't point at specific people and say, "This is the Antichrist." Why? Because they've seen what happens when people do that. The false alarms, the damaged credibility, the boy who cried wolf effect. But what they do say is this: watch for the pattern. Watch for the signs. Watch for a covenant with many nations. Watch for someone who appears to solve the unsolvable. And when the Abraham Accords were signed in September of 2020, many of them said, this could be it. Or it could be a preview. Either way, pay attention. Amir Tsarfati, an Israeli Bible teacher who runs Behold Israel Ministries, wrote, "The Abraham Accords may not be the covenant, but they could be the foundation for it. Watch what happens next." And that's exactly what happened. People watched. For 4 years, from 2020 to 2024, the Accords held. Trade flourished. Embassies opened. Relations normalized. Now, let's be fair. There are also voices pushing back, and they have valid points. Critics, both from within Christianity and outside it, are saying, you're reading too much into this. You're forcing modern events to fit ancient prophecies. You're succumbing to confirmation bias. And they have history on their side. Because the truth is, every generation of Christians has thought they were living in the end times. In the first century, believers thought Jesus would return in their lifetime. Paul even addressed this in his letters. In the year 1000 AD, people thought the millennium would trigger the end. It didn't. During the Black Plague in the 1300s, Christians were convinced the tribulation had begun. When Napoleon was conquering Europe, some said he was the Antichrist. During the Cold War, people thought the Soviet Union was Gog and Magog. It didn't. He lost credibility, and he damaged the witness of countless Christians. So when skeptics say, "Here we go again," another false alarm, they're not being unreasonable. They're being cautious. And that's a fair warning. But here's the counter-argument. Just because previous generations were wrong doesn't mean this generation is wrong. At some point, a generation will be right. At some point, the prophecies will be fulfilled. At some point, the covenant will be confirmed. And the question is it now? So why do so many prophecy teachers think this time is different? What sets the Abraham Accords and the 2025 expansion apart from all the false alarms of the past? Let me give you 5 reasons. Reason number 1, the specificity. Past prophetic speculation was often vague. There's a charismatic leader. There's global unrest. It must be the end. But this is specific. Daniel said, a covenant with many. Not just conflict or leadership. A covenant with many nations. And that's exactly what we have. A documented, signed, multinational peace agreement involving Israel. That's not vague. That's precise. Reason number 2, the technology. Previous generations didn't have the technology to fulfill certain prophecies, like the mark of the beast. How could no one buy or sell without a mark in the days before computers? But now, we have digital currencies, biometric IDs, smartphone payments, facial recognition. The infrastructure for Revelation 13 exists for the first time in history. Reason number 5, Israel is central. Every major end times prophecy revolves around Israel. And for most of Christian history, that was impossible. Israel didn't exist as a nation, but now it does. And it's exactly where the Bible said it would be. And it's dealing with exactly the conflicts the Bible predicted. So the stage is set in a way it's never been before. The prophetic connections going deeper. Now, let's dig into the specific prophecies being connected to Kushner's deals. Because it's not just Daniel 9:27. There are multiple passages that seem to align. 1 Thessalonians 5:3, the Peace and Safety Declaration. Paul wrote, "For when they shall say, peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape." Now, this isn't just about peace existing. It's about people declaring it, proclaiming it, celebrating it. And what did Trump say on October 13th, 2025? Permanent ceasefire, enduring peace and prosperity. Peace, safety, prosperity. Those aren't generic diplomatic terms. Those are the exact concepts Paul warned about. And notice what Paul says happens next. Sudden destruction. Not gradual decline, not slow collapse. Sudden. Like labor pains on a pregnant woman. And that imagery is intentional, because Jesus used the same metaphor in Matthew 24 when describing the end times. Wars, famines, earthquakes, deceptions, all increasing in frequency and intensity. Like contractions. The first contraction is mild. You barely notice it. But they get closer together, stronger, more painful, until finally, the birth. So when Paul says sudden destruction, he's saying, once the peace is declared, the final contractions begin, and they build until the return of Christ.